it's not a jig, right? But is it? I just wanted to talk about real quick, and I know real quick doesn't always work for me, so I'm going to throw together this little spinnerbait one, and then I'm going to end this video and I'm going to jump back in talking about basically all the jig options you have. Because is a spinnerbait a jig? I don't know, you tell me, is that a jig? So is a spinnerbait simply a jig attached to a small little schooling, like say an A-rig. Say if you had an A-rig set up, instead of putting your traditional little swim bait on it, what if you stuck jigs on each of those little spots? I mean, is that not adding a jig to a schooling fish, right? So is that not what a spinnerbait is? Is that not what a buzzbait is? And this little guy's what made me want to start the whole video little series here. This guy was thrown in with my spinnerbaits. It's basically the same thing. It's a jig with a prop bait to make it a topwater bait. We call them buzz baits, but it's basically someone devised a way to present a jig, that's a jig, to a fish in a different way. So same way with, and what made me think of this was because I interchange all my different skirts with all my different basic jig baits, right? And I've kind of noticed over the years that I've really got a favorite jig. This guy, right? The chatterbait is my favorite jig bait because it's a jig that is clearly the best example of when they take just a regular jig and add something to it. They just stuck a blade on the front of it. Genius, right? So anyway, I'm just kind of going through my boxes. I'm going fishing today. This is probably the last weekend. It's like 6:30 a.m. I haven't had any monsters or coffee or nothing, so you have to bear with me on this live video till I get the ball rolling. I'm going fishing today. Probably use some of these different baits, but I hardly ever throw a spinnerbait, and I was going to try to talk why about that, just because I've kind of replaced my spinnerbait fishing with chatterbait fishing. And I know there's times I should put that chatterbait down and go right back to a spinnerbait, because spinnerbaits are definitely deadly effective ways, and honestly probably the easiest way. And I find myself, I guess I'm too hard on myself. I will try to find the toughest way possible to catch a fish. Sometimes that means with the BFS gear. Now other times BFS gear is the simplest, easiest way to catch fish, to start putting numbers in the boat. You downsize and you do it. But sometimes, there's different ways. But anyway, that video is not about me. This video is about basically the jig. Way back when somebody invented this, and I don't know all the history on spinnerbaits, but they basically took a jig and added these, put it on a wire and added some spinners to it to basically imitate a schooling bait fish. And I think they thought they were trying, I don't know, maybe they thought they were trying to imitate several fish, in a pod schooled up together, or maybe they were just trying to add flash to their jig and get it to, ride up higher in the water column without just swimming along. And a swim jig, I guess that when you get to this kind of basic jig with nothing attached to it, there's all different kinds, shapes, sizes, punching, flipping, swimming, every different size. But then we jump to the spinnerbait. And in my mind, I think when a fish sees this go by, I don't think they think it's one fish, just like the A-rig. And I know these were invented before the Alabama rig, but basically, if somebody would have invented the Alabama rig first, somebody would have downsized it because they don't like throwing that big thing, and they would have come up with something like this. Same kind of thing. They play off the same principles, right? So I honestly think, and that's why these work better. I know a lot of guys talk about putting a Colorado blade on when muddy water for the extra thump, but I think that's when you don't even want to use a spinnerbait. Some people, yeah, they'll catch fish. That's, I think, when you definitely would want to use a chatterbait, crankbait, something different. Spinnerbaits, you need some visibility, but you need it to be, that's why when it's real windy, I think the light, like on a clear, bright day, spinnerbaits don't work as good, because a fish clearly comes up and realizes that these two things, or one thing, or whatever's up there, looks totally different than this. But for me, back when I first started fishing, I think I only threw a spinnerbait. Like when I started fishing, I threw a spinnerbait. Then I kind of developed into the little like man's one baby minus, like some various little crankbait. Then I started worm fishing, and man, I hated worm fishing. Oh my God. Slow, boring. I want to throw it out, reel it in. Yank and crank, right? Throw it, reel it. That's why I fished. Spinnerbaits are one of the best ways to do that, to cover water and all that kind of stuff. But like I mentioned, when that water clarity gets to where the fish kind of realize what they can see and what's going on, a lot of times they won't hit a spinnerbait. Now somebody will say, oh, well, you got to get the right color, sizes, blades, and all that. But there's just sometimes spinnerbaits aren't that productive. They just are. And there's other times when that's what you should be throwing. And I think it comes down to visibility, that right light, just enough to, this is a bunch going on when it comes by them. You got 1, 2 willow blades, one of these little Colorado with the willow, or, it comes buzzing by. I think it looks, I don't know what it looks like to the fish. I think it looks like a couple fish just like trying to speed by and get through, and so they just attack it if they're in that mood. But if it's too dirty, I don't think they even see it. You got to literally throw it right in front of their face. They don't bother to come looking for it. But then if it's too clear, they can just make out that, dude, that is not right, and they don't hit it. So anyway, I'm going to put this video, and then I'm going to jump to the other ones. So when I'm fishing with spinnerbaits, hopefully you can kind of make out here, I don't have a ton of different colored ones. But the baits I recommend for us that like the BFS, the little Pond Magics, the Booyah, are the baits I recommend. Now, you're not going to be ultralight fishing with these. There's some on AliExpress that are considered, very small. But when I'm throwing like BFS gear, the light rods with the BFS reel, I like these little. And then this is, I believe, a Strike King. I don't know if it's based off the Bitsy bug or something. I believe that's where I found that out. Now, I don't have any of the links to any of these. Little spinnerbaits actually can be tough to track down, but I think they're the Pond Magics, what they're called. Booyah. And then I think Strike King also makes these little, I think they're based off the Bitsy bug, and it's got Bitsy in the name, I think, but I can't remember exactly what they call them. But these can be effective. I'm kind of going through and sorting out my box, but I think my favorite color of that whole bunch is this, and these have all gotten a little bit neglect from me, so for some reason that blade right there wants to rust more than any of the other things. Everything else will be fine. The hooks will be fine, sharp, not rusting, but that little blade develops some rust on it. But I like, out of all the colors anyway for the little spinnerbaits, I kind of like that one, or just a standard color, a white and chartreuse. Yeah, I picked this one up, I think, last year, the Z-Man. It's actually, that's on the touch of getting beyond like BFS gear. But there's another one of those little like Bitsy Fire Tiger colors. But I still have to go, when you're throwing a spinnerbait, I honestly don't like throwing spinnerbaits with BFS gear. I just haven't gotten enough practice. I just haven't done it. I like the little bitty micro chatterbaits if I'm gonna, try to downsize to that kind of thing. But there's days when you take just a big white spinnerbait, or white and chartreuse. That's why I was bringing this one into the mix. Or you take white chartreuse. Sometimes you change the blade up if it's on a little bit of an overcast, not a completely bright day. Sometimes switching out to adding some gold along with when you're adding chartreuse can make a difference. This one's got a little red added to it. And I don't remember where any of these really when at what point I acquired these, or I just kind of slowly built up my spinnerbaits. Now I do know that this little guy was hard to track down. Where's he at? And spinnerbaits kind of are spinnerbaits. I don't know why do I have that on there? I don't know why I added this. That's another thing real quick. Chatterbaits, I don't know if I've ever caught a fish with a regular size, 3/8 half ounce chatterbait without some sort of trailer. Spinnerbaits, I typically don't use any trailer, and if I if I do anything, I use I just add another hook, you know, a trailer hook basically. I don't add an actual plastic trailer of any sort. But I want to talk about this bait real quick because this is one of them I found a while back. Oh boy, I will have to try to track down the name of this guy. But I found that, and they may not make them anymore, but Rogers Sporting Goods still had some. It's kind of a small profile, but still a heavy bait. You can't throw it with BFS gear because it is like a ½ ounce, I think. But on the very, you know, overcast, sun just coming up when there's not much light, man, this thing kind of like almost in a sense glows in the dark. Them blades they give out there, those are those mid, they're not the Colorado or the Willow, I forget what they call those. That name escapes me. But anyway, those baits can work good. So if you want to, like, I guess you can see, I've got a spinnerbait game going on here. I've got a bunch of different ones. At one time, I kind of knew how to throw them, when, where exactly. But now I kind of keep it simple. If I don't know, I guess some of the fundamentals real quick. If you're going to throw a spinnerbait is, you kind of want a windy condition to a certain point. You want that chop on the water along that bank. Everybody that I've ever watched that's good about with spinnerbaits claims that's when you bring out your spinnerbait over, as opposed to just a regular like a swim bait or a crankbait or something. They claim that that's when the spinnerbaits shine. Back when I threw them heavily, I threw them anytime, everywhere, whatever. And I never had a favorite. I do kind of like this style because they don't slide around because I use snaps. I don't tie directly on. And I don't even remember where I got this guy. I'm looking at him going, where did you come from? I don't know if that was... And if I don't put a link below and you're trying to track down something, there's only a few places I order from. I occasionally get discount tackle, but usually Tackle Warehouse, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, and then, you know, of course, AliExpress when I look for cheaper stuff, and I usually talk about that's where it came from because it was cheaper. But my regular gear, Rogers Sporting Goods, locally, it's a little ways up north, but if I have to track down, that's where I'll go to get something when I need it for like the next few days or whatever. But there's also Everhart's down in Clinton, Missouri. And most of those places I find, if you call them, if you want something, they do shipping. They do. Some of them do have some online stuff, even the little stores. But if you want a specific thing within a couple days and it's hard to find, a lot of times if you call them places, you know, they do offer that sometimes, like shipping something. And there's also the hookup tackle I've dealt with. They're not close to me. They're down, I think, Alabama. But the hookup tackle, no, wait, the tackle trap, sorry. The hookup tackle, the hookup trapple. I'm losing my mind here. It's too early in the morning, I told you guys. Hookup tackle is also a decent place, but I'm thinking of the tackle trap. That's the guys I've known on different forums and dealt with them. They're good guys too down in Alabama. But the hookup tackle, the tackle trap, oh shoot, there's a new one out. I can't think of it. He's messaged me a few different times. I don't know. It'll come to me, but I haven't ordered hardly anything from him. But if I'm looking for regular spinner baits, that is the ½ ounce KVD model. That came with, that shows you how much I use spinner baits. Way back when I got my depth finder, fish finder, that KVD when I got out there. And it just because it said KVD, it came with like a spinner bait and came with its a little assortment of baits. That bait came in that package. See the little KVD deal? Came in that little bundle. And I've caught fish on this. And that is a good bait. But that is about a standard bait that I would recommend if you're new, you're like, I want to try spinner baits. I'm just new to fishing. Roughly a ½ ounce. Now, if you're already jumping into BFS stuff, then yeah, just look for the little Pond Magics. If that's all you got is BFS gear, just track down. And I honestly recommend especially the Pond Magics aren't that expensive. I would get almost one of every color because there's times when just little colors would work. But when it comes to your basic, what I consider a basic spinnerbait, it's right there. It's a ½ ounce. And it's probably this one or a Strike King because that's one thing. Strike King, Booyah. There's I guess I'll talk about that while I'm jumping on it. But basically a ½ ounce white and chartreuse. are your like standard ones. I don't usually, like me, you'll see me fishing black and blue chatterbaits and different jigs and stuff. But when I'm doing a spinnerbait, I usually, it's not many colors. It's white and chartreuse, all chartreuse or all fire tiger. Then that's usually when I switch to like a gold, you know, darker, nastier water, nastier conditions, you know, cloudy, not much sun. I go more chartreusey, more goldish copper colors. Bright sunny days, but windy with chop on the water. Probably all white with and I always typically, now if they come with different blades, sometimes I even change blades, but I usually stick with what they come with. But I'd say the main brand, and in all fairness, I've knocked Strike King over the years, but they have been making spinnerbaits for a long time. You know, they're a big company. Somebody comes out with something, they got their version. Hence the chatterbait thunder cricket, right? And I guess they paid, supposedly, I think anyway, I heard just in a video the other day that they paid for licensing through, you know, in order to have that same hookup the way that they make theirs. So they had to pay to get that copy of the bait. So Strike King's been making spinnerbaits for a long time. They're good spinnerbaits. Also, War Eagle, I like their spinner. They're freaking expensive, but I do occasionally buy one here and there just because I like the design of theirs and the way they make them, and they do work. They're good spinnerbaits. They're a little pricey. If you are on a budget, don't get none of those. Just go to the Walmarts and Kmarts, and there's not even any Kmarts around anymore, but basically track down a cheaper one. A lot of cheaper ones, there won't be a ball bearing swivel. The Strike Kings and most of your higher end ones will have ball bearing swivels. AliExpress has spinnerbaits too. I have not bought any from there because, as you see, I bought these like, that's literally a 4 or 5 year old spinnerbait. I don't, it's kind of got the hook a little yanked out, but I don't fish spinnerbaits that often. When everything else is letting me down, I still think there's a big bite on, I'll switch to spinnerbaits. So, you know, they just don't, some days they just don't want a chatterbait. But also, where do I know I got one in here somewhere? One of my favorite brands back when was I can't remember what Hank Parker used. Was it Mann's made spinnerbaits for a while? But I also like these guys, and they're not very expensive, and they usually you can find them, and they make some different variations. But the heart, and they've got the little heart on the bottoms, how you can spot those. They also make, I just like their spinnerbaits. If you can tell, it's like a thin wire, and it does have the bait, the blades kind of right up, and these are like a Colorado style, but I don't know, some of the hearts I like. I've got all different kinds. I want to say that one that I was trying to track down and going to show you guys, I want to say this is a Strike King too, but you can see it's clearly made different. It's got most of the weight is hidden under here. See that big chunk of weight? It's red. So although it doesn't look real big, say compared to standard, it's hard to make out on camera, but sitting here looking at it in person, this one just puts off a bigger profile look. This one is just as heavy, but in a smaller, just a little more compact. But it should get down, and it actually, at the same speed, I think has a tendency to run a little bit deeper. I just like that sometimes. But I had my game going. I had a spinnerbait game going way back when. So I mentioned my favorite colors. Just white and chartreuse. Maybe pick up one or two of your, and we're going to talk about buzz baits next, of your actual like fire tiger or just all chartreuse for the darker water. Some, I don't know. I don't know if I've caught a fish on this bait. Some guys are adding a little bit of orange. I think they're hunters. They jump into the fish market, but I typically don't throw orange in any of my, add it to any of my buzz baits, spinner baits, none of that. I got a few new ones, and that's why I was going to show in a video how to make this guy more productive. I'll do that in a topwater buzz bait video. But I don't know if I can answer any questions if you guys got them about spinner baits. I can tell you what I What I know about them, I just know that get them, they will get hit if you struggle. Like and they sell little trailer hooks, not, you know, trailers like, you know, put on a different swim bait or nothing. I like mine without anything other than sometimes I'll add that little trailer hook if you're missing fish. If you just feel you're getting nippers, like you can feel something hitting at it, it doesn't hurt to add a little trailer hook. I typically don't even throw those on because it can't. I usually try to throw a spinnerbait around the edges of grass lines or somewhere, and the extra hook can be more of a problem, I think, than it is good. But definitely, there's certain days I definitely grab one, track one down. I got it somewhere scattered out in my box. I got a couple, and put one on if I have to. So anyway, if you got any questions about spinnerbaits, wow, 20 minutes, and I've got to wait. The water temps are, I don't know what yet, but the air temps outside right now are in the high 30s, low 40s. I'm waiting for them to get into the close to 50. I'm going to time it right. Somewhere between 10 and 11, I'm going to get on the water. But anyway, I don't know if I even covered anything to tell you guys about this stuff other than at Rogers Sporting Goods. They do sell blades. And I just bought some here and there, different ones, to try out on that murky water. But I've kind of come to the point where I just jump to something else. But these are definitely jigs with spinners on them, right? So you basically have these spinnerbaits. You have chatterbaits, buzzbaits, any other baits. What am I thinking of? So yeah, there's like several different ways to fish a jig. One of them's called a spinnerbait. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I gotta go. I gotta make another video. Check it out too.